Hello, welcome to the Bcamp podcast. I'm Richard Carey, and today we have with us Rodney Waterman, who is the Director of Industrial AI at Lityx. So thank you, Rodney, for joining us. We're so happy to have you here. And
hmm
uh, to start out, maybe tell us a little bit about Lityx before we jump into your background.
Sure. Lityx is a company that provides AI, advanced analytics to multiple types of businesses. Um, Over 10 years ago, it was more around marketing agencies and financial organizations, healthcare organizations. Um, a few years ago, stepped into the industrial realm where we're providing optimizations of processes and equipment health in an industrial facility. And so that's relatively new to the company, but is part of the reason why I came on. So it's a company that's been using machine learning and mathematical optimizations for companies for many years. Not a new player in the whole AI space, but certainly has uh, significance in several different
Cool,
industries.
cool. I love it. And yeah, let's talk a little bit about your background. Would love to hear how you got into AI, how you landed at Lityx. Just kind of give us
hmm
your journey.
Yeah, it's not what you might think, I guess, because a lot of people start out now thinking I want to get into the AI space, right? But that's not where I started. I have an engineering degree, so I started in engineering and worked as a process engineer in a couple of different industries for several years, primarily working around automation, then grew into how you visualize information from the plant floor, data collection, and some analytics there. Stepped over the fence into more of a consultative sales role with Honeywell several years ago, and then worked for a services organization, and then more around data collection, historizing high-speed data, how you handle that from an analytics and visualization perspective. And then that led me to uh, more advanced analytics, which led to AI, which led to Lytics. So it's a little bit of a crooked path, if you will, but um, still, I think when you look back over my career, I was headed in this direction the whole time with collecting data from the plant floor, and then what can you do with that data, right? And that's the question. And so that's something that we're helping with our customers and prospects on a regular basis that have been collecting data for many years. Um, some using it effectively, and some wondering what they can get from it, but it's been a fascinating journey.
Interesting. I love that. That is it's a the long and winding road. Do you what advice would you give to people looking into to get into AI today?
Well, I hear and see of some that are very focused on just a piece of it, right? They're either looking at prompt engineering or strictly something around programming, um, but one of the things that's difficult to achieve, and I'll advise this anyway, is difficult to achieve the experience to understand what you can do with it. And so my first advice is learn as much as you can about some area of AI, what the benefits are, what are companies getting from it, um, how is it really being used, so that it's not just it's not just cool technology, but you're learning how to truly benefit some industry. Maybe you're mostly interested, well, maybe I should back up and say become interested in some type of business because technology for technology's sake isn't valuable. It's only valuable when you would apply it to a business problem or a social problem. Maybe you're interested in conservations of some type, or maybe you're interested in helping with animals extinction and making sure that their longevity. And so you can apply AI to understanding migration paths and things like this, right? So learn more and more about that type of an application and what those benefits are and what can be accomplished so that then you can put your skills to use. And when you have a conversation with some potential employer, you'll understand and know what your value really is. And you can present yourself in that way. So don't just learn the technical side, right? But instead couple that with what's really going on out there in the world and how can I apply my knowledge and what I'm gaining here in a technical side to that real world problem so that I can help, whether it's a business thing that is going to accomplish greater profits or if it's a well whatever, right? So look for what really interests you and then learn how AI can apply to that.
Yeah, I like that. And this is something that I hear very frequently, that basically that we need to understand the problem. AI is this powerful tool, but if we really
Hmm.
understand the problem we're trying to solve, that, you know, we need to have that as a foundation before building a solution to solve
Hmm.
the problem, which sounds, it makes sense. It's common sense, but sometimes easy to forget.
Yeah, I had a you're right. I had a conversation with a potential customer recently who has had two failed attempts in their organization using AI. And in asking him, what do you think it was that caused that? And us talking through that, it really turned out to be it was an executive, I don't want to say demand, but an executive heard about AI, wanted to see what it could do for them. So he called in somebody he found online, said, "Hey, come in here and see what you can do." Right? So there was no specific goal. It was just, "Hey, come in here and see what you can do." And so that's, I mean, there are 1,000 processes in a manufacturing site. And so where are you going to start? How are you going to find a problem to solve if you're not the process expert? So our first questions when we're talking to prospects is around what is it that we need to solve? What types of problems do you have that have variability to them that we may be able to reduce
Mhm.
that variability? What is it that um, you need to reduce or increase depending on what it is? Increasing yields a lot is a solution we're providing and reducing variabilities around quality, trying to make sure it's very stabilized, some things like that. So once a customer or someone understands what it is that they're really looking to solve, as you put it, um, what are the questions we're asking? When we know the questions, now we know how to start,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Can you talk about some of your favorite solutions that you've come up with, or even maybe some of the most interesting challenges that you've come across where you've been able to apply AI or think you can?
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I'll talk about challenges first. It's it's very common. There are two challenges that are very common. One is people not understanding what they can accomplish, right? Um, and we've talked about that a little bit already. The second is whether or not they have the data they need to accomplish what they want to accomplish. So we can ask questions, but only to the data that's there. So if I'm asking a question and maybe I have a little bit of data, um, but I need this data over here as well, then I'm probably not going to find an answer that's helpful. I may find an answer, I might find insight, it just might not be helpful. In fact, we had a customer once who um, I won't get too technical with the industrial situation, but to use generic terms, they had a very large dust collection system. And this dust collection system has bags in a large um, uh, container the size of a big room, and these bags have a life expectancy. And they had a similar manufacturing site in another country, and that the bags in one country would last 3 years, the bags in another country would last 5 years. And so they're trying to understand why. What is it that's going on that is causing this? And so our team came in, got the data that they had given us, had lots of conversations, um, created models, ran scenarios, and determined that there were a couple of things that were causing this difference, although it wasn't what they expected, right? It was around two things. One, around their maintenance practices were different in one site versus another site. And then the product mix was different from one site to another site. Now, you might stop and say, why didn't someone recognize this without calling in a team of AI experts, right? And so there's two things. One is, unless you stop and look, people are just used to doing things the way they do things, and they assume the plant on the other side of the ocean is doing it the same way. They don't actually ask the question. The other is they had a preconceived notion that it had to do with their process, how they were operating. And so we were not able to give them an answer to how to change their processes, but we were able to give them insight into what's going on, right? So it's not always the answer that you think it's going to be, but it gives you insight as to what's going on. And once you have that insight, you're able to make some decisions that could impact that. For instance, they might change their product mix. They might change their maintenance practices, right? But it's not a process problem that they thought it was going to be.
Interesting. How did they respond when you guys shared this information?
It's always not always, but oftentimes it's, oh, I didn't think of that, right? Sometimes it's somebody in the room says, I had a gut feeling that that might be true. It wasn't the case in this one, but oftentimes somebody has a gut feeling, and AI is used to validate that, but not always, and it's useful, very useful for that as well, because there are process engineers, controls engineers, people who know the process really well. They've been around it a lot, and they see things that happen, but there are too many parameters for them to try to correlate each input and reaction. And and AI can do that though. AI is great at looking at all of those parameters and seeing what those patterns and correlations are, coming back and showing you what the results are from a predictive model that says that gives a prescription. We can then give a prescription that says if you'll do this, then you'll have your best day every day. And you might have a process engineer who says, I wondered about that, but he didn't really have hard evidence to go and make those changes, um, because he just wasn't
Mm,
100% sure. And so by being able to bring in AI, now now they're very confident that they said, yeah, I thought so. Now I know so, and let's go make these changes
mm.
to make it better.
Yeah, very interesting. So I'd be curious to hear if you have any like applications or projects where you're like, wow, I would love to do this. No clients are asking us to do this yet, but if you see like what types of challenges do you get excited about of like wanting to try in the future with some of the new technology that's coming out?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's actually something on my mind right now, that again, I'll try not to get too technical with it, but so as I mentioned earlier, there are systems in industrial sites that collect data from the plant floor and store it in what's called a historian. And those historians are often built um, to capture very fast, um, you know, fraction of a second speeds, with thousands of variables. So you'll end up with, you know, millions of records in just a day or two, right? So it's just grabbing lots and lots of data, and then it's visualizing the process on a display somewhere. And so there are operators and engineers and managers that are watching the operation, right? So if you wanted to, visualize a paper machine, and you can see the machine and the paper flow from where it's very wet at the beginning to where it comes out as a sheet of paper at the end. Well, what I'd like to accomplish, I'm working on this now, just starting to work on it, is to be able to couple um, an AI platform like Lityx IQ to the systems there on the plant site so that an operator can see a screen and maybe see a performance indicator of some sort, and he looks at it and he says, that doesn't quite look right. It's not alarming. It's not telling me anything's really wrong, but I can tell by these couple of things that something's not quite right. And I want to give him that opportunity to then maybe right click on that value, pop up a little menu that says, what has changed? What's going wrong? And then allow the model that's been built with AI previously to run a quick analysis, come back and say, this is the parameter that has the biggest impact right now on what you're seeing. So that he is given immediate information on how to go and attack what he sees going wrong. That would be tremendously valuable. We're not there yet, but we're getting close, and I'm very excited about being able to see really multiple technologies brought together to accomplish something like
Hmm.
that.
Cool. Yeah. What I'd be curious just to hear what technologies you might use. You mentioned Lytics IQ. I'd be curious to hear a little bit more about that. Uh, you know, what other sorts of technologies would you think about using in this solution?
Well, so I did mention that there'd be a combination of technologies. Um, on the plant floor, there are often control systems that are vast and have these everything from data collection to controls to visualization and such. Um, Lityx IQ, what I mentioned, is our platform that streamlines the building of advanced models and mathematical optimizations using machine learning, deep learning, and such to be able to build those. And the Lityx IQ, as a tangent here, I'll just share. Lityx IQ was built several years ago, first as a platform to help data scientists streamline the work that
Hmm.
they were doing, um, and then grew into something that is a no code platform for people who are not data scientists but understand analytics and can build their own platforms and can move forward that way. So taking that kind of a platform and coupling it with these systems that are already on the plant floor um, can be very powerful. And that's what I was getting at a minute ago when I mentioned the combination of technologies to be able to
Love
accomplish
it.
those things.
Love it. Very cool. Well, I'm going to change gears here just a little bit, and I'd be curious to hear
Okay.
about your education. So at Bcamp, we're kind of approaching
Mm.
education what we think is a little bit different approach. And so I'd always love to hear about good experiences, bad experiences. What comes to mind when you think about your own education?
Well, from an education, formal education, I have an engineering degree from the University of Tennessee, and that was I happened to choose a path at the time that was more theoretical than it was hands-on, if you will. Some college programs are a little more one way than the other. That just happens to be what I did. Um, but I've put my education more to a hands-on kind of approach since then, and over the years needed educated on various things because of the path that I took. So I've taken advantage of a few different things online, such as Power BI tools or using that tool, some machine learning things, right? And so just as examples, and I did actually start an MBA several years ago that I got about halfway through and quit. Primarily because I was having more children and they were taking more time, but uh, but it's that was in response to the fact that I have always connected what I was doing to the business side of whatever company I was working for. How am I profiting you? What is the value of my work? Instead of simply being given a task and then accomplishing that task. That didn't interest me as much as it did understanding how I'm benefiting the business. And so um, the MBA side kind of followed from that, and then I don't know that it hurt me a lot that I didn't finish it. It really gave me some really good understandings that I needed to kind of dive into at the time. But I wouldn't at my engineering degree was several years ago, and there are so many opportunities to learn online now. Um, I wouldn't discount a degree, but I also would certainly take advantage of all the good tools, all the good training that you can find online now. Um, but but back to my original comment, I would make sure I broaden that enough that I understand something more than just the
Mm-hmm.
technical.
Interesting.
I have benefited a lot from learning more over the years like that.
A lot of questions that I have here. Maybe you start with your MBA, and you mentioned that it was valuable even though you didn't graduate. And
It
I'd
did.
be
It was,
interested to
yeah.
hear more about that because I feel like there's a little bit of a stigma around MBAs that it's just to get a certificate, and like build a network. But I'd be curious to hear about, what you've found valuable
Yeah.
about it.
I I guess I'll reserve an opinion about that, but I certainly can see that that's true. That it's more of a badge to wear than it is always valuable. And I can't say that every class that I took was as of equal value. But there were some things that were valuable around, um, well, you know what? Around analytics and the the direction I was headed required me to take a course that was more around marketing analytics, which is something we provide now. So it's a little ironic that all that came back around. But it taught me a way to think about how things are promoted, pricing models, um, how you show value to the market, and things like that. So from that standpoint and those types of things, I got a lot out of that because it certainly wasn't something that is taught in an engineering
Hmm.
program. At least it wasn't in my day. Maybe they do something today that they didn't do then, but I didn't get that kind
Hmm.
of thing in engineering.
Yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting. Well, we are coming up on our time here a little bit, and uh,
Okay.
would love to hear if you have any other final thoughts or things that have come to mind before we wrap up. If not, that's okay as well.
I guess the only thing that comes to mind is I see people. I'm on LinkedIn regularly, and I see people confusing the different AI types. And so one of the things to do, I think, is to determine where you want to be. Um, you know, the AI I'm involved in requires machine learning algorithms, but there's so many other areas that if you're just doing it using LLMs maybe or something else, but understand what those different options are, where you're headed, but don't discount what's valuable, maybe that's being used in another area too. So you don't want to get so broad that you don't know something well, but you also want to have a little bit of an understanding of what else
Hmm.
is out there.
This is a paradox, a little bit of balance, I guess.
It is a little.
How you
Hmm.
how you
It's true.
take your career. Well, thank you so much, Rodney, for
Hmm.
joining us. Great conversation.
Hey, I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
Thank you for
and
having me, Richard.